I made a video recently talking about how you can use characters' eyes and the way that they're looking to add to the composition of your artwork, and I want to talk about a couple other ways to do that as well. This tattoo is referencing comedy and tragedy masks, sort of the laugh now, cry later thing. So instead of having their eyes interacting, I wanted them to have more of like a blank theatrical mask kind of look. So in order to make this tattoo feel a little more complex, like the composition was dynamic, I overlapped them a little bit. Instead of having hearts that are just next to each other, you can give them a little bit of overlap. And then the curvature of the tears shooting out is to make it a little more interesting and dynamic, have a little more action in the image. Another thing you can do to make the composition more dynamic is play with depth of field. In this dog portrait, it's of his pet dog, and he had the idea of doing something nautical, but the dog's name lent itself, in my mind, to having like a whiskey bottle with the message in a bottle thing, and then a little touch of beachy scenery in the background that kind of creates this larger composition where you're still first and foremost noticing the dog. That's the important part of the composition, but then there's these other elements to kind of play around with foreground and background, and in a really simple way, make it flesh out this story a little more, give it a lot more interest and depth. When you're doing a composition that involves flowers, a way to keep that interesting is to think about the blossoms all being a little bit different. So in real life, in nature, you put a bouquet of flowers together, they're all not going to look exactly the same. They're slightly different shapes. They'd be facing slightly different directions. Some of them would be more open. Some of them would be a little more tightly closed. And you can mimic that natural thing in your artwork. You can also add interest with things like a ribbon around the stems. You can think about if you want to show the stems or have it be more a grouping that just the leaves show and you don't see the ends of the flowers. Here, the client loved the idea of the hand grasping, which I always am super into adding, like a Victorian looking hand. And then it's just fun to play with the contrast of the hand not being shaded in at all, and then the leaves and the flowers themselves having more saturated color and variations of how saturated they are to, again, like create a little more dynamic composition.